Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, ever merciful. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon you, dear viewers. Welcome to tonight's lecture organized by the UK Talim Department. As per our tradition, we will start with the recitation of the Holy Quran. Can I request Shafur Rahman Sahib to deliver the tilawat and its translation, English translation, please?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Walaikum assalam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قالوا سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. I have just recited verse number 33 of chapter 2, Al-Baqarah, and the English translation is as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the gracious, ever merciful. They said, Holy art thou, no knowledge have we except what thou hast taught us. Surely thou art the all-knowing, the wise.
Sir, we cannot hear you.
Jazakallah for that, pointing that out. So Jazakallah for the tilawat. Tonight we have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Shakeel Ahmad Sahib. He's serving as president of New Malden Jamaat of Ahmadiyya Muslim Community, UK. He's working as consultant psychiatrist in London. As always, there will be opportunity for you to ask questions. These will be put to our guests on your behalf towards the end of the program. Please type your questions into the live chat and kindly ensure they are relevant to tonight's topic. It gives me a great pleasure to hand over to Dr. Ahmad Sahib to deliver the lecture on the knowledge revealed in the Quran as a proof of Quran being from the Creator.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, as we've heard in the introduction, the subject of the discussion today is about the Holy Quran as the ultimate source of knowledge for us. And we've also heard the recitation of this verse from chapter 2, verse 33, where the angels were asked and they said that they respond to Allah saying that, "Oh Allah, it is you who have all the knowledge and not us, and it is you who taught us anything." So the emphasis of this presentation is going to be about the knowledge contained in the Holy Quran, and the theme is derived from this book that most of us would probably be familiar with, the book called Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge and Truth, a book by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabe, Rahmallah Ta'ala. And as of those who've read the book, they would know that this book makes an attempt to describe the relationship between revelation and rationality. It makes the points very clear that rational and honest approach is essential to gaining true knowledge, and that knowledge is essential for human progress. But at the same time, the human ability to acquire knowledge is limited. We know that if we develop some understanding about the laws of nature through scientific research, 20, 30 years later, we begin to realize that there were some shortcomings in our research, and that in fact, better understanding develops later. This tells us that despite our honesty and despite our effort, our ability remains limited. And then the book guides us towards the ultimate source of knowledge, which is God's revelation, and without which the human knowledge remains incomplete. So this is going to remain the theme of the discussion today. This slide is basically a timeline of the development of life on Earth. And if you can look at the left side of the screen, which is the beginning of life on Earth about 4 billion years ago, and gradually passing through stages of unicellular and multicellular life forms and plants and marine animals, land animals. But coming to the modern humans, it's only about 100,000 years ago. Not even half a
Sorry,
million.
Dr. Sahib, if you have you moved the next slide to next slide, please. Have you changed the slide?
Yes, I am on the slide.
Okay, no, okay, it's not coming on the screens. Yeah, now it is on our screen. Yeah, thank you.
Is it?
Yeah, now we can see it. Yeah, before it wasn't. So now, yeah, that's
Okay.
it. It's on.
So if I think maybe I should then keep it in this format, because if I go onto a full screen, then you probably don't see the changed slide.
Yes, if you can keep it like that, then we should be able to see it. Yeah, that's right.
In that case, I can enlarge it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is, I was just briefly saying that this is the timeline of the development of life on this planet, and that the human spread is only about just over 100,000 years ago compared to the total life duration of about 4 billion years. And the farming and city concepts developed only about 12 to 15,000 years ago. And then, of course, when Allah decided and thought that the humans or the life has developed enough to make use of the guidance from Allah, the revelation, then Allah started to send his apostles, his prophets. So Hazrat Adam alayhi salam 6,000 years ago, and the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about 1400 years ago, and promised Messiah alayhi salam only about 130 years ago. So what we're going to do is to look at the knowledge given in the Quran in a summarized form of different stages. Historical knowledge, which would be about the period prior to the revelation of the Holy Quran. Then the knowledge about the events during the life of Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then a lot of emphasis on the knowledge that we have discovered about the laws of nature in the time after the Holy Quran, and particularly in the last 100 or so years through modern science. So firstly, about the knowledge of the period before the revelation of the Quran. We know from our study of the Quran that it describes in detail the historical events of the life of Prophet Moses alayhi salam and his interaction with Pharaoh of his time. And we also know about how he invited the Pharaoh to worship the one and only God. And Pharaoh was a tyrant and did not accept this invitation. And ultimately, he and his army were destroyed. Now, of course, there's a distinction between how the Holy Quran mentions these events compared to how the older scriptures mention it. So the Holy Quran's description is totally in accordance with the laws of nature, and that is what we find as a distinction of the Holy Quran above other scriptures. But amazingly, the Holy Quran also gave us a prophetic knowledge, and it is that the body of the Pharaoh, despite being drowned with his army in the sea, will be preserved. And we discovered this prophecy to come true only in the recent history. And we know that this body is now preserved, and the Holy Quran also described the purpose of it, that this is being preserved so that people can learn a lesson. The Holy Quran described to us about civilizations that mastered the art of carving big rocks and mountains and building their houses that way. We did not know it at the time of the Holy Quran where these existed, and they have been discovered in the last 2 or 3 centuries in different parts of the world, including in some of the Middle Eastern areas. Moving on to some of the information or knowledge in the Quran during the time of Holy Prophet ﷺ. We know that the 2 big civilizations before the advent of Islam were the Persians on the east side and Romans on the northwest side of the Arabian Peninsula. Here you can see the Persian Empire before the advent of Islam. This is the area which is now Iran, and this is Iraq, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, Turkey in between, and this is the Arabian Peninsula. And then the Roman civilization was more on the northwest. And at the time when the Quran was being revealed, there was a battle or ongoing war between Romans and the Persians. And the Persians were being dominant and defeating the Romans. However, the Holy Quran made a prophecy through revelation to the Holy Prophet ﷺ that the ultimate victory will be of the Romans. And that is exactly what happened during the life of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that the tides changed and the Romans started becoming to be dominant. Interestingly, this subject or this interesting part of our history is being described in an amazing detail by Hazrat Khalifatul Masih in his Friday sermons these days. And we've been hearing about how the Muslims gradually spread right up to Baitul Maqdis in the last sermon. Again, the Holy Quran spoke about that the Prophet ﷺ, when he leaves Mecca, he will be welcomed in Medina, that ultimately there would be victory against the Meccans. And that is what we saw on many occasions, including the Battle of Badr, a subject of the current sermons of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, Adallah Ta'ala bin Isra Aziz. And then another big prophecy that was made during the journey that Holy Prophet ﷺ was making from Mecca to Medina, his immigration. And during that time, this verse was revealed that he will be returned successfully to Mecca. And within 10 years, this prophecy was completed. Now let's move to the knowledge about the period after the revelation of the Quran. We've touched briefly on the evolution of life already, but the creation of universe has been mentioned in the Holy Quran. Scientists, until about 70, 80 years ago, understood that universe had always existed. Incorrectly, but that was the scientific understanding of the time. And this argument is what the atheists used to say that the universe has always existed. So where is the role of a creator? But in the last 70 or 80 years, we have begun to understand that in fact there was an origin of the universe. And that not just the matter was created, but space and time was also created at the time, the concepts of Big Bang. And so it is important for us as Ahmadi Muslims to be confident that in fact science is gradually beginning to recognize the knowledge that has been given to the Quran. And there is harmony between what Quran tells us and what science ultimately teaches us. The concept that it is either a choice between a science or religion is an incorrect concept. And in fact, it is atheism that ultimately gets proven to be unscientific. So coming back to the Quranic verses, there is knowledge about the creation of universe, the planets being shaped into their orbits, so the pathways in which they follow, the settling of the atmosphere on Earth, then the creation of the water, the plant life, the animal life, exactly in this order as they evolved. The Holy Quran has spoken in many verses about the origin of life in the clay-based earth. And now the science tells us that it is those areas where the tide comes in and goes back, and there is repeated interchange between the moisture being added to the soil and then the heat of the sun evaporating it. This primordial soup in the original times was the areas where the inorganic carbon dioxide and hydrogen turned to organic sugar molecules, which provided the energy ultimately to lead to the formation of complex proteins, which could then replicate themselves, and therefore the reproduction started. Holy Quran mentions about the early life forms were invisible to the eye, so microscopic. The word jinn is used in the Holy Quran, and that these life forms were dependent on heat energy. And we know that the solar energy and the sub-oceanic volcanic heat energy were responsible to lead to these early microscopic life forms like the archaebacteria. The Quran tells us that originally the reproduction was not gender-based. So it was asexual reproduction, and only in time became pairs, as in male and female, and the concept of sexual reproduction started. But at the same time, Quran mentions the very important concept that we need to understand in the evolution of life, that this process was being guided with wisdom. It was not a matter of chance and random mutations in the genetic makeup of a species that led to another. One of the most striking examples that I find, which is mentioned in the Holy Quran, that provides evidence that this process was being guided, is the development of speech. If it was only chance-based development, then we would have seen millions of years of development of gradually more complex language, ultimately leading to human language. But that is not what we find from scientific evidence. What we find is that the other animals do have some kind of rudimentary communication capacity. They make sounds and movements and communicate with each other. But then at the stage when, and I'll show you in this next slide, when the modern humans evolved, at some stage there, the Holy Quran says in chapter 55, verse 4 and 5, that we taught the capability of bayan to this species, because Allah had brought the process of evolution to a stage where the humans would now be able to ponder on nature, understand nature, and then make a decision or choice whether they want to live in accordance with the laws of nature as guided by Allah, the Creator, or in avoid following this guidance. And the consequences they have will depend on the choice they make. So this is a very striking example of guided evolution as described in the Holy Quran 1400 years ago, and we are only learning about this knowledge now. I move on to earth sciences. Earth's hidden treasures are mentioned, that at some stage that the humans will be able to cast out these treasures, that they are limited. We now know that the fossil fuels are limited and about 50 to 80 years are left if humans will continue to use them. The Holy Quran talks about the eruptions and tremors due to activity inside the earth, volcanic activity. The Holy Quran has talked about the oceans with barriers which will one day be made to meet. So the making of the Suez and the Panama canals. So the Mediterranean and the Indian Oceans were separated, and only by making the Suez Canal in the 19th century, and then similarly the meeting of the Atlantic and the Pacific was only in the south of the Patagonian Peninsula. But then making of the Panama Canal by the humans made these oceans meet. Water cycle, another amazing thing. People knew that there is clouds and there is the sea, but they did not understand that there is like a cyclic relationship between them. And this has been described in the Holy Quran, and we now learn it and teach our children in school. Then we move on to some knowledge and prophecies that have been made in the Quran, but they are of specific significance for us as Ahmadi Muslims, because these prophecies or this knowledge was given about the latter days, the days when, after the advent of the Holy Quran and the Prophet ﷺ, for some time people would drift away from the true teachings. And then would be the time of the promised Messiah, may peace be on him, to bring back those teachings and reignite the true spirit of these teachings. So the Holy Quran has spoken about the faster, more different types of transport modes to come into existence, and then the older modes like the camels would go out of use. The Holy Quran has spoken about bringing people together through communication systems. We see that that is what is happening. In fact, you and I are communicating through these systems now, sitting separately but communicating with each other. The Holy Quran has spoken about the rivers being drained together, and we know that we create dams and lakes and reservoirs through river water. The Holy Quran spoke then about animals being collected, and we have now developed zoos. The Holy Quran has mentioned about books becoming commonplace, so publications, and we know now we have millions of books practically on all sorts of subjects, and that written knowledge will become the main source of knowledge. At the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, we know that the paper and the pen did not exist. People used to write on parchment or rocks, and this is how the original verses of the Holy Quran were collected. Quran has mentioned about the possibility of the humans escaping from the natural environment that has been provided to us. So the possibility of space travel. The Holy Quran has mentioned about people making an attempt to alter Allah's creation. We do this through genetic engineering and genetically modified food. And the Holy Quran has mentioned about microbial infections happening on the planet due to us not living our life in accordance with the natural principles. The Big Bang, the origin of the universe, and interestingly, the singularity, the word that the scientists use from where all the matter in the universe comes, is also in harmony now with the Islamic terminology. Do we not think of God as a unified master of all the creation? Do we not think of this as a unified single force or origin? So that's what the scientists are using the term for the source of all the universe, as the term singularity is used. Expansion of the universe has been mentioned in the Holy Quran. The orbital motions of the celestial bodies has been mentioned. Gravitational force. The Quran describes that the planets and stars are intertwined with each other through as if invisible pillars. So a force that binds them or keeps them together and intact and on their paths, but it's not visible to the eye. And we understand it as gravitational force. We know that scientists are trying to look for life. They consider there may be possibility of life in other parts of the solar system or universe. But the Holy Quran is definite about this, that there is life elsewhere. And in fact, the Holy Quran says that if Allah wills, at some stage, the humans may come in contact with this life. The role of the sun and the moon in our lives, in our weather systems, in our day and night transformation. The atmosphere as a protective layer has been mentioned in the Holy Quran. And the ultimate collapse of the universe has been mentioned, that we would roll it back like the scrolls. Entropy is a concept which relates to the loss of energy, particularly heat energy in thermodynamics. So the summary of this concept is that the natural creation and energy is finite. It's not unlimited, and every system slowly loses this energy. Now, these principles have been mentioned in the Holy Quran more generally, but the Quran has told us that creation is not eternal, it's finite. That the only eternal factor is the prime cause of creation. And that the ultimate creator is the source of all the rest of the matter and the laws of nature. Embryology, the birth of a fetus, a small fertilized egg turns into a human being. In fact, very interestingly, the birth of one single baby or child is a short-term 9-month replication of the evolution of life on Earth, from a single cell to a full human being. And the Holy Quran has described the 6 different stages about the birth of the fetus, development of the fetus, and the birth of the child. And these accounts are so in accordance with now the current medical knowledge that I missed the name of this very eminent obstetrician embryologist from Canada. And when he found out that the Holy Quran has mentioned these stages of the development of a fetus, he said that he's convinced of at least one thing about Islam and the Quran, that this book cannot be from human knowledge, given that this is 1400 years ago. Similarly, about the water being the main constituent of all life. We know that our body is 2/3, 70% water. And so are many life forms. That even plants have genders or pairs, male and female. That pollination takes place through wind. There is spread of the seed of the plant by wind. In neurosciences, Quran has mentioned about the conscious and the subconscious. There's something that is inside us and something that only communicates directly with God and only God knows. And similarly, that when we go to sleep, we go into a hibernated state of reduced activity. These are the things that have been mentioned in the Holy Quran. That matter or things that we see with our eyes are created with very small particles. So atomic and subatomic particles. And also the exchange between the earth and the outer space, visible and invisible. So the visible exchange is through meteors, and invisible exchange is through radiation. And we discover these things now without any understanding of these concepts 1400 years ago when the Holy Quran spoke about these things. Max Planck and Niels Bohr were the 2 Nobel laureates of the early 20th century, and they came up with the quantum theory. And this theory basically states that the organized form of life comes from some kind of an organization before. Random creation is not possible. It also implies that conscious life can only come from some kind of consciousness before. Another pointer, scientific pointer, towards the existence of a conscious, wise creator. And the Holy Quran has challenged the human mind to observe the creation as critically as we can, and that we will not find any flaw in the laws of nature. One of the Ahmadi Muslims, physicists who got the Nobel Prize, we know of him, of course, Abdul Salam Sahib. He got the prize with two other scientists, Sheldon Glashow and Steven Weinberg. But Abdul Salam Sahib explained that the idea of trying to demonstrate that the four fundamental forces of nature, in fact, are in their origin one force. He got this from his study of the Holy Quran. And then he joined hands with the other two scientists to try to do experiments to prove this. And then it was understood that there were four forces, and he proved that the electromagnetic force and the weak nuclear force are the same. So the scientific understanding moved from having four fundamental forces to three fundamental forces. And then later, after his work, we've also proved that the strong nuclear force is also part of the same group. And therefore now science is at the stage of an understanding that there are two fundamental forces. And inshallah, with further work, the concept or the idea of Abdul Salam Sahib will be proven true, because he got this from the Holy Quran, that all these four forces, in fact, are different manifestations of one force. Even in the political sphere, Gog and Magog have been mentioned, that they will exploit the weaker nations through their power, that the children of Israel, which is the Jewish tribes, that they will collect in their original land, and therefore the formation of the state of Israel that we saw in the 20th century. The effective model of United Nations has been mentioned in the Holy Quran as to what would make the different countries have a political system that can live in harmony or peace with each other. But if they do not follow the principles guided by the Holy Quran or by the revelation of God, then they will end up using this knowledge to destroy each other, destroy their cities, destroy their own development. That's been mentioned in the Holy Quran, and that's what we've seen in the last two world wars and many other wars even now going on. Future of life on earth has been mentioned with amazing distinction in the Holy Quran. The three possibilities are mentioned. That the possibility of other people with better understanding replacing the humans, or the possibility of humans evolving into a different species or a different life form, or the possibility of a new creation altogether. So we need to keep in mind that if so much of knowledge in the Holy Quran comes true as our scientific understanding develops, that how much more of what is given to us in this revelation will come true in our lives. And briefly, the guidance in the Holy Quran about our political systems, how to make a peaceful society. After all, the name of the religion is given by the Quran to be Islam, meaning peace. And the purpose of religion is to bring peace to human society, for people to be able to live in harmony with each other and with intolerance and do justice to each other. And all this guidance in social systems, in the political systems, in the economics, and interreligious relations given in the Holy Quran is with this purpose, to create peaceful societies so that humans can live in harmony with each other. The question then arises, all this information, all this knowledge, who wrote this book? Of course, we have some evidence. We've already touched on this concept that scientific concepts have changed over time. And we know that the human ability to understand nature remains limited. On the other hand, we see from this evidence that knowledge in the Quran is beyond human ability or human scholarship, and that this knowledge is gradually proving to be true as we develop our scientific understanding of nature. So, Quran must be from a superhuman source. Then there must be an all-knowing superhuman creator who knows everything, and that the only possibility that remains is that this creator, the all-knowing creator, must have been the author of the Quran and revealed it to his prophet Muhammad, may peace and blessings of Allah be on him. So what we see, in fact, is that the word of the creator, which is the Holy Quran, is in harmony with the work of the creator, which is nature. And there can be no discrepancy between the two. This knowledge is not given to us as a textbook of science teaches science to us. Science teaches us something about how or what. But the Holy Quran teaches us the answer to the question, why? So it's not just about how day turns into night and how does the earth rotate around its axis. It's about why does this happen? What is the significance of this? And the main purpose Quran teaches us is that we need to ponder on these laws of nature and build our personal relationship with our Creator, God. And it is only through recognizing the authority of God on our minds and our lives are we going to be able to build peaceful and just societies. So, Khalifatul Masih Rabe, the author of this book, concludes his book in his closing sentences, and I will read two quotes. He says that when religion is interpreted without rationality, when faith is divorced of reason, all that they give birth to are myths without legitimacy and legends without substance. Mindless trustees of faith succeed only in making a mockery of divine wisdom. Without a rational approach, we are not able to understand God's guidance. And I would invite humbly my brothers and sisters who are listening to this to think of any religious movement now who is trying to approach religion with the rational and scientific approach and bridging the gap between the two. It is the blessings of the promised Messiah ﷺ and his insight into the Holy Quran, and then brought to us by his Khulafa, that is helping us understand this particular magnificent and the only creative way to use God's guidance into our scientific pursuit. Hazur also writes, revelation enlightens belief, illuminates the soul, and blows breath of life into faith. What the sun is to day, a prophet is to religion. Bring to an end the prophethood, block the passage of revelation, and then you call it a doomsday. Nothing will remain but stark death. So this is just a one slide summary that for us, our sources of knowledge are the Holy Quran, any other divine revelation passed on to us by Allah's chosen ones, and the leadership of the prophets and their successors, the Khulafa. Only then our attempt, or even our scientific attempt, can be successful. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah, Dr. Sahib. It's such an amazing and inspiration lecture with the facts you've quoted and how succinctly you've mentioned all the references. And I'm pretty certain that our viewers must have benefited this. and particularly all the references you mentioned there. Of course, they can watch this again and again if they want to read your slides with the references. Now, the second segment of the program, we have Waqas Sahib, who will lead the Q&A session and closing session of this program. So I will pass on. There are quite a few questions, so I will pass on to Waqas Sahib to take over now.
Jazakallah, Shakeel Sahib, and Jazakallah, Dr. Sahib, for such an informative lecture. And it was certainly very detailed, and it was a very detailed and sound insight into the Holy Quran, most certainly being the ultimate source of knowledge, as you have very beautifully and intricately explained with such clear-cut examples. And Jazakallah once again, just to echo what Shakeel Sahib said, for your time and for gracing us with such an informative lecture. Again, like has already been said, there were several questions, well, quite a few questions that have come through. If I start with the first one here, this is from a member in Cardiff. I don't have the name here of the member. Does the Quran mention anything about the depletion of raw materials like oil and natural gas under the earth? And if so, could you quote a reference if you have one? Jazakallah.
What I know is what I briefly touched in the presentation also, that the Holy Quran does refer to that the earth has hidden treasures, and that at appropriate time, humans will get in touch with those treasures and will bring them out. So it's not just about the raw materials like oil and natural gas, which are fossil fuels, and we know that we are now exploiting them and using them, and in fact probably overusing them and damaging our climate, but also other minerals, also precious stones. And so there's different types of materials which are in fact very useful resources that come from inside the earth, and that we mine them. So that's why there's a lot of mining around the world. And we use them in industry, in our day-to-day lives, and in our scientific experimentation. So that's what I can say about this particular question.
Jazakallah. The next question that's come through is actually quite a generalized question, but I'll read it out as it's come through, and I'll leave you to answer this. Is what does the Quran say in terms of the use of stem cells? Are such treatments using stem cells permissible in Islam?
I remember that Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Adillah Ta'ala was asked this question in one of the classes. And Hazur said that, look, any scientific research or utilization of scientific material or natural material that is used for the benefit of mankind is permissible. And anything that is used to the contrary purely for business reasons, or trying to make changes in natural principles, like trying to create, I've come across a German scientist who worked on the cadavers of post-mortem bodies, and is now coming up with a theory that because majority of the people die with heart attack, that in fact he wants to, through genetic manipulation, create a body with two hearts. Now, this is a lot of scientific criticism has also gone to him, because this is an unnatural expression of a scientific ambition. So Hazur tried to make this point clear, that as long as we do not interfere with natural principles, the laws of nature, but we utilize natural materials for the benefit of mankind, then it is permissible. So if stem cells are used, which are naturally occurring cells, and can be removed from body without leaving the body in any serious damage, then if they were to be used in order to treat cancer or some other complex diseases or Parkinsonism, then these kind of treatments are helpful for mankind and they should be permissible.
Jazakallah. The next question that's come through here is, in terms of the Big Bang Theory, does the Quran mention anything something that agrees that discusses something that agrees or disagrees with this theory, or is this theory mentioned at all?
If I understand the question correctly, is there something in the Quran that is different to the Big Bang Theory? Now, I would want to rephrase it that if there is any disagreement between the scientific understanding of how the universe was created or the event of Big Bang and what the Holy Quran says, then ultimately science will come around and demonstrate with evidence that Holy Quran was correct. So that is one conviction that as Ahmadi Muslims we should start with. Of course, then we do the scientific experimentation as Ahmadi scientists, astrologers, with open mind and fulfilling the requisites of scientific experimentation. And we will know, and we should go with confidence that we will come to that kind of a conclusion that Quran was correct. Now, the Holy Quran has mentioned that there was an origin to the universe. Science did not think of it. As I said earlier, about 100 years ago, this was not the understanding. But the Holy Quran had said there was an origin point. Now we know that there is an origin point. Science calls that event as a Big Bang because what they have now discovered is that the origin of the universe must have been a very dense, unified source from where all matter and energy has come. And they name it singularity. Again, as I've mentioned, it's a very Islamic term to my mind to use that kind of an expression in science. So the Holy Quran, of course, said that it is an attribute of the Creator to create and then wind up when the Creator considers it to be appropriate and then recreate. We don't know from our scientific understanding whether there have been previous universes or whether there is another universe, but we definitely know there are many millions and billions of solar systems and galaxies. Each solar system is practically a little universe for us. We are so tiny. So yes, in the Holy Quran, there is mention of the Big Bang. There is also mention of the expansion of the universe, which we now understand from scientific theory. It is also mentioned that ultimately the energy of the universe will run out and that it will be rolled back like a scroll, as I mentioned earlier. So the end of the universe is also mentioned. But beyond that, I don't know.
Jazakallah. I think we've just got maybe time for one more. Another question that's come through here is, what is Islam's view on Darwin's theory of evolution and Darwinism, and how can this be linked to, well, it says predestination, but maybe Allah's plan, predestination for the future?
Predestiny.
And I think the question was more on what Islam's view on the theory of evolution and Darwinism is, rather than
Right.
sort of predestiny.
So my study of Darwinism actually reminds me of two things that are not normally understood. One, that he was not always an atheist, and that the modern neo-Darwinists have turned him into an atheist. They write of him and about his work as if he was an atheist. But I've read in his writings where he considered the possibility of there being a creator, and that some of his discoveries of the origin of new species, for example, he was so amazed that how could life transform from this stage to that stage, which he studied through his travel around the earth in that ship, the Beagle, I think it was called. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing is that there was Wallace, I think was the name of the other scientist who worked more or less at the same time, who also came up with the ideas of development of life through gradual stages. And this particular original idea of Darwin and Wallace is in harmony with the Holy Quran. The Quran tells us that originally life was more simple, was in the clay stages of the earth, developed gradually, and Allah gave the life more wisdom, and that was the purpose of creating life, and then taught us to speak and write, and then started sending revelation to us so that it enables us, facilitates our journey towards Allah, which is the primary purpose of creation of life, to become sincere in our relationship, in our worship of Allah, and live in harmony with each other. And this growth, according to the Holy Quran, or this evolution, does not stop with the humans. One, Quran keeps the option of more intelligent, more evolved species open. Quran definitely says there is life on other parts of the universe. How intelligent they are, we do not know. But also that when our physical life comes to an end, when we pass away, our soul does not cease existing, that the evolution of the soul, the spiritual evolution, carries on. And then the soul transforms from one stage to a higher stage or a more closer stage towards Allah, therefore referring to better and better stages in the afterlife, or the reward in the afterlife. So this is the Quranic concept of evolution. Darwinism shift where it meets these principles, then it is correct. But where it shifts away from these principles will obviously be proven incorrect, even if some scientists still stick to it. And there are some areas where Darwin originally did not shift away from these principles, but like I've said, the following generations of Darwinist biologists or evolutionary biologists shifted away. So when they started talking about just the genetic mutation of a protein molecule leading to another form by chance, that is wrong. And that is incorrect through several examples. I've just shared one about the ability to speak a language with you during this presentation. Development of the eye. If you study its development in the species, only when it was relevant and the life came out of the deep oceans, because in the deep oceans you don't have light. You don't need an eye. Even the species today that live in the deeper oceans don't have complex eyes as we have. But now we do. So Allah developed eyes at the stage of evolution when the species needed the eyes. So there are several such examples. So that's where Darwinism shifts away from Quranic principles. That's where it is wrong. So we should not think of it as either the whole of Darwin's work is useless or the whole of it is correct. Science will always remain gray. The only eternally true and correct principles are from God's guidance, and that is the point of this discussion.
Jazakallah. Jazakallah once again, Dr. Sahib, for such an informative lecture, and certainly some great answers to the questions that we received. Just to close today, we would just like to remind all of our viewers of next week's lectures that will be taking place, inshallah, at the same time and the same days, with the Urdu lecture taking place on Monday, the 4th of October, and the at the usual time, 6:30 p.m., and the English lecture taking place on Tuesday, the 5th of October, again at the usual time of 6:30 p.m. We look forward to welcoming all of our viewers again at that time. Just to close, Dr. Saab, could I kindly request you to lead us in a silent prayer dua?
Okay, दुआ कर लें. Ameen.
Ameen. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.